A quorum, what's your pleasure on the minutes? Regular meeting in May and a no meeting in June? Second. Any questions? Comments? Not all in favor of the motion, make a note by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. I am gonna move the new business over the old business. Because the old business is probably gonna take a while. So we'll have a public hearing for Mr. Capps first, and then we'll old business. You want to start us, Holly?
Yes, and just so you all are aware, Mr. Capps already had a trip planned, so he was unable to be here. But wanted me to pass that along. Anyways, he's applying for a special exception permit for a detached dwelling unit for his son. The plat you all have in your packets is what he just got done. He was not able to subdivide the property because of the road that it's on. You can't subdivide off of a private road. Therefore, he would rather apply for the special exception permit to put another home on his 21-acre parcel on Pine Ridge Drive.
Said her son already lives in the house with
Yes,
him?
his son already lives with him. Yes.
Oh, with him.
With him, yes.
Anybody have any questions or something before we open public hearing?
I saw like the 21 acres. How does the 3-acre plat here we're showing fit into that?
Okay, so
Yeah.
this plat, here, let me take the whole thing.
Mhm.
This plat is what he brought in to get signed. He thought he was able to do this as a family cut because he's already done 2 for his other children. The first 2 plats shouldn't have been approved, but they were. The most recent one he brought in did not get approved because you can't subdivide anymore out there. So this will never be recorded. It was never signed. This was just him showing where on the 21-acre parcel it's going to be.
Oh,
So this 3-acre lot does not.
where is his house on that plat?
He's not on the 21-acre lot. They kind of have like a Capps family compound.
Oh,
So we've got him over here and then another son over here. And then there's already another house there of Mr. Capps's.
any other questions before we open the public hearing?
And so the lot minimums, they were meeting those requirements.
Yes, and they met the family cut requirement as well. This son has never received a family cut. Everything was great except for the road. We just can't create any more lots on that road.
For the zoning ordinance.
Yes. You can only have a max of 3, and I think there's probably
Oh, fine.
9 lots, probably homes, maybe 6. Which is very common. This is not out of the.
All right, well, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone like to speak for or against proposal from Mr. Cap? Anyone like to speak for or against?
I'm one of his neighbors. I was here to support him.
Huh?
I'm one of his neighbors. I was just here to support him. I didn't know he wasn't gonna make it out.
All right. Anyone else like to speak? Not, I'll close the public hearing. The other question I had is, I've had a piece of property too. They gave their son a portion of the land, only one driveway in, and then he sold that land, that house and the land. And how is that, does he still have a free right of way into it? Cause I've had problems with, they wanted me to keep the road up, yet they use the road all the time. Use it a whole lot more than I did.
I'm not sure that I'm following the question.
Road maintenance.
Road maintenance. Road maintenance on this piece of property. If his son decides to sell his house, sell a house he's building to someone else, who's responsible for maintaining that road?
That's up to the people who live on that road. I don't know if you all have a road maintenance agreement or not out there.
I'm behind him, but there's no count on anything out there.
Right, we
It's up to
can't-
them to work.
Yeah, it's
All right.
essentially just a driveway. So unfortunately, we can't make them create a road maintenance agreement, but
All right.
And VDOT doesn't own the road either.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have just one question. So the special exception permit is that because of this rural preservation area thing? Is that where that's all coming into play or?
No, by and large, you can only have one home on a parcel. And if you want to have another home, you have to get special permission because we don't allow several homes on one. He tried to create a whole new parcel, its own lot for anyone to put his home, but you also can't subdivide.
Okay, no, that makes sense. I was just wondering how frequent these special exception permits. Like I said, I support Billy doing what he wants to help it. But I'm just wondering how often these special exception permits.
Well, over 2 years, and I think this is only the second one I've done, so not super, super common, but they do happen.
Not too many on houses. You'll get special exemption permits for other projects. You want to put up a garage or something on there, if it's too tall, you have different heights as far as houses, but it is a kind of limit as to what you can subdivide, even if family cuts. It probably should have been thought about earlier and cut it a little bit different, and he could have probably got a cut off of this one. Of course, depends on, I guess, how many children you have too. How many cuts you get. All right, is a motion to accept? Okay. Is there a second? Second. All in favor, make a note by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Heard you, Jennifer. So we'll pass that on to the Board of Supervisors, and then they'll have the final say on that. All right, we'll move on to the old business. I guess the Board of Supervisors passed it back to the zoning, or else maybe we decided we need to do it. And we met probably 2 months ago, and then the Board of Supervisors met to go over what zoning committee had discussed.
Yes, the board went over it in their workshop and wanted it to come back to you all to see the recommendations that they had. For the most part, they backed up everything that the zoning committee brought and even added some things. They wanted you all to put eyes on it again and hope that we can come to a consensus tonight so that we can get the ordinance written and have a public hearing in August. If we're not able to get to a consensus, then we will hold off another month. But that is the goal, is to see if there's any glaring errors or anything missing out of here that you all wanted to see.
Well, I will bring up one question that Taylor brought up
Okay,
during that webinar I was watching. He said if the owner of the land, after they put the solar farm there, he still owns the land, can he build a house on the land in front of the fence?
there's nothing in zoning that says they can't. So I guess that would just depend on the lease between them and the solar company. Because if it's not within the fence or the buffer,
But I mean, he'd be probably building it on the buffer. That's what I was wondering.
if it required them to remove the buffer, then no, because the buffer would have to remain.
The 1,000 feet buffer.
It's 1,000-foot setback. They're only proposing a 150-foot buffer, but 1,000-foot setback. So within the setback,
He could-
yes, because the setback only applies to the solar project. The home would just have to meet the zoning district's regular setbacks.
Anyone else have any other question? There was a lot thrown out. You've been over a lot of times.
I know, I tried to put the
I'm not-
last page in there to kind of summarize what all the comments meant. It's just kind of a list of the changes instead of digging through all the different colors.
Actually, I watched it too, the committee meeting, or the board of supervisors meeting, and I made some notes. My phone, I was out of town, I was in Maine where all was going on, so I was watching it and making some notes on my phone. One of the things that they were concerned about is that about the batteries. If they had batteries, and it may be something, I don't know if this one's gonna have batteries, but other ones in the future may have battery banks. And I think you were, Dexter, somebody was concerned about runoff if there was a fire, the battery tank. That could be easily fixed if you required to put some sort of a berm around the battery bank so that there won't be any runoff. You know, I mean, that was my suggestion when I was listening to him discuss it. They put some sort of a raised area or berm around it, concrete wall, whatever they want around it. That way, if there's a fire in there, you squirt a bunch of water in there, it's not gonna run off into the creek. The acid will stay contained inside of that berm. That was one of the things that I thought about when they were talking about that. Another thing that they were discussing, I think Dexter had a problem with this, was talking about the types of buffers that they were gonna put. And you know, about the hardwoods versus the evergreens and stuff like that. And you could set that up with the 3 layers of buffer. One could be hardwoods and the other 2 could be evergreens. I mean, you can dictate what types of vegetation is gonna go in those buffers. Be a mix so that when the leaves fall off, you can't see through it. I mean, if you use evergreens. That was one of the things that they talked about. They were talking about if the buffers would ever get disturbed or bothered, you could always put in there that the buffers ever could be developed as long as the screening was not disturbed in any way. Maybe that 1,000-foot buffer, I don't have a problem if somebody develops it, but not to the point you can, I mean, the whole thing is the buffer is to prevent people from seeing it.
Yeah.
So you can develop it in a manner that doesn't eliminate that screening. I mean, I don't see why somebody shouldn't be able to develop that 1,000 feet around that thing if they are, as long as they don't eliminate the reason behind putting it there. And then, I think I had one more thing. They were talking about the popularity of the solar farms and stuff. You know, in the comp plan, you know, before when we revised the comp plan, because I was on that committee too, is that we did it through a survey throughout around the county. Through Survey Monkey, which what the county uses. Perhaps the solar farm thing should be a countywide, thing before we start sticking them in beside everybody. You know, maybe people should,
You mean-
countywide should have an opinion.
Just on the comp plan portion or on the whole thing?
Well, just really, this should be part of any sort of a survey you do. Since that's a new and upcoming thing, I would think that should be something should be put in there so everybody has an opportunity to voice their opinion about it.
Well, it did bring up, they wanted to have at least 1, possibly 2 public hearings before we ever received it
Right.
to bring
That's
the
not a bad
public
idea.
up to do it. That was a comment on, as one of the added things. I'm not sure who from the board of supervisors brought that up, but that is in there. And I thought that was pretty good. That gives you an idea, the public, if they miss the first one, they catch the second one, and then they miss the second one, they catch the our meeting. And then after that, they'd have 4 chances to certainly speak.
And like I said, I watched it while I was on vacation and I just made some notes on my phone while I was watching things that they had concerns about, just some suggestions, a way to maybe settle those concerns.
Was that phrase as, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Was that phrase as a 2 town halls? No, we phrased it some type of way.
Just to have one community meeting, before it ever came to planning commission, because people don't love when I'm the first time they hear about a project that their neighbor's doing. So definitely at least 1, but that's up for discussion if you all think it should be 2.
My feeling is that this is probably not gonna be the last one that's gonna come before us. And would be my guess.
Accurate.
And I honestly think that the county people, citizens should have some input. Should have we need to figure out the 60% not care, the 20% want it and the 80% don't want it. We need to know where we're going with this thing. That's just my feeling.
Catherine, I think if you had, I'd say a minimum of 2. In case somebody missed the first one, they could make the second one. And then, that would bring out a lot that the solar project could get straight before they ever brought it for us, for the concerns. That's my preference. I think it would cut down a lot on, the discussion we would have at public hearing here.
Well, there are 2 public hearings. There would be the planning commission public hearing and then the
But I think,
board of supervisors.
I think the public needs it before. I think it needs a
Yeah.
town hall or something before.
Yeah.
At least
I'm talking-
one, if not but
But in
2.
addition,
Yeah,
there are 2 public hearings.
Yes. We can make that change though.
I mean, that way it doesn't hitting us and then we table it and then they gotta come back and rewrite it. And then we get it and gotta table it again, rewrite it.
And not only just completely redid their ordinance, they did excellent, and they are requiring 2 town hall meetings before the first public hearing. So there was some precedent for that.
If we have the first public hearing here, it's usually a long night.
Yes, it is.
And a lot of times, I don't think a lot of the information comes out until we hit the public hearing.
Right.
So if they had a couple town meetings in that area or even here, I think you'd get enough of that stirred up that time we met, if they had concerns, they could come to some of us to express them and see if we could work that out.
Right.
Instead of us work it out here.
The main comments I made were, were addressing things that the board of supervisors were concerned about would be the berm around the battery areas to contain any runoff that doesn't get in the streams. And then I think it was Dexter had some concern about the types of screening and, maybe requiring different, one of hardwoods and 2 of evergreens and have them staggered so that, and the development of the property, 1,000-foot buffer is a lot. I don't really have a problem if somebody wants to develop part of that, just so long as it doesn't eliminate the screening.
Right.
That's the 3 main big issues I wanted to bring up.
Was there some discussion, you say berm, was there some discussion on a berm in front of the project?
Yes.
Or anywhere that we got into the view shed?
In one of these sheets,
That's what I was trying to find.
I know. There is a section in, it's K, it's under screening and fencing. It is on the next page, number 3, berming. Berm shall generally be constructed with a 3-to-1 side slope to rise ratio, 4 to 6 feet above the adjacent grade with a 3-foot wide top with appropriate pollinator-friendly native plants, shrubs, trees, forbs, and wildflowers.
But that was around the whole facility, isn't it?
But a lot of times,
Start to move. They don't like.
But somebody that claim they don't move a lot of ground.
Yeah.
yes,
I mean, I could understand around the batteries.
Right. Well, I mean, if you got a fuel tank storage area, you've got to have a berm around that tall enough to hold the entire contents of the fuel tank if it leaks.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a federal law. And so I don't see why the batteries should be any different. We're concerned about having a fire and we've got to squirt water in there. You don't want to float the battery acid off down the creek. I mean, it's kind of a common sense thing.
so do you all think having the berming for the whole facility is overkill and we should take it out of there and only require it for battery storage?
Personally, I think it's an overkill
Okay,
because the more land they move, the more it's gonna wash.
that's true.
You put a berm around there and I don't know where the water's gonna come out of there.
Okay.
David, what do you think? You're the representative of the board of supervisors here.
I'm with y'all on the entire. I think the entire is a little much to ask. Anywhere it gets in a view shed from somewhere, I think we ought to have that option to require that.
Yeah.
It might not be the whole, it might not be the whole facility, but
Certain areas.
certain areas, but with 1,000 feet setback, the view shed is not gonna be as much, but probably ought to, it wouldn't hurt to have it in there in case we need it.
Yeah, I agree. I think you leave it as an option. I do think doing the whole thing is overkill and it's expensive and you're moving too much land, particularly some, it may be backing up to another 500 acres of timber. What difference does it make whether it's got a berm over there or not, right?
So maybe we add a sentence at the end saying, unless otherwise approved by the board of supervisors, if it's a project that it would just not be appropriate to have a berm all the way around, but always require it for the battery storage.
Or any area that may have any hazardous material runoff.
Okay.
Somebody mentioned, that the battery fires, that they had to be submerged. I don't know whether it's correct or not, but if you do have a berm around it, then at least water can be applied to the point of doing that. They said that someplace in California had a special truck to do that. That actually picked the battery up and submerged it to put out the fire.
It was more for vehicles, like electric vehicles.
Electric vehicles. Yeah.
I don't know if they would go on site and pick a battery up out of something like this application.
Well, in any case, that still is an advantage of having the berm. It retains it, but it also would help to immerse the battery.
Think about the 25 feet, 15 foot. 25 feet is awful hard not to see it. Talking about the solar panels. I think most of those that are in now are probably 15 when they tilt.
Yeah, and the Torch project, they were nowhere close to 25. They were either at 15 or under 15. So 25 compared to other ordinances was a little generous.
I mean, even tilting 25 feet, that's pretty steep. Especially if you're trying to hide. And if it happens to be on a hill. And drop back to 15. 15 Mac. On the high port, on the tilt.
Maybe 20. I don't think about 20.
They're not planning on doing any farming or cutting grass or anything under it. I don't need about 15 and sufficient.
Well, it's supposed to maintain underneath it.
It's supposed to be
But
grass under it.
I think at 15 feet, even if it tilted, you could probably still get a mower under it.
Yeah, I think so.
So,
Yeah, I haven't seen enough of them to do, but I would certainly think 15 feet should be
that's
plenty.
plenty tall.
That's,
Roy, talk about the burns, the containment for the batteries. To keep with the environment, do we want to call it a containment area? That way it may force them to do a concrete containment area, or do we want to do dirt? Or you want to just call it a burn and not leave,
Well, I mean, if you had a battery storage facility as big as this building, you'd pour a lot of concrete.
just ask.
You know, I mean, the dirt, some of it will permeate through the dirt anyway. The concrete would be more impervious, but I don't know that it matters whichever one. If you had a 4 foot tall or 3 foot tall, 5 foot wide berm or 6 feet wide berm, I don't think anything would ever get out of there that would get into a stream or anything.
Okay.
I mean, it's that kind of up to y'all. Whether y'all feel like it ought to be a concrete wall or actually, but it could do either one. So just if you want
I mean,
containment, that's fine.
I think you could put language in there that would depend on how big of storage that you've got. I mean, if it's a relatively small area with a relatively low risk of serious contamination, then you might be able to get away with the burn. I don't know and how big these batteries and everything else get. So
What about if you just put it some sort of a containment structure and then leave it up to the board supervisor or the planning commission to determine whether it should be a concrete wall or whether it should be dirt? As long as you call it, say it's got to be some sort of a containment in case of a fire in that area, because we're going to put a lot of water on it if it's a fire. And that water, these batteries are melting, that acid that's running off downstream, if they have some way to contain it. That's my whole thing about that, is that if we have to put it out, we're going to float on water on it, you know that. And then it's going to just float the acid right on downstream, unless they have some way of keeping it. Do some containment, whether it's a berm or a concrete wall or whatever.
The containment sufficient to contain the concern as it relates to fire or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would have to be some way adjustable to what you've got there, right? It'd have to be appropriate and that would based on some type of engineer or something that would tell you how much fire, how much water you have to put on to catch it, put it out if it gets on fire.
Is it, you think it'd be some information with the building code? I know if you put a fuel tank at a gas station, you have a containment, it's got to hold probably 1.5 times or 2 times the fuel. You reckon it'd be worth just asking building official if it's something in the code that would help size the berm to the,
I know any fuel storage place has got above ground tanks. Like even when Wilford Ford had those, he had to have he had a dirt berm around it. Southern States, when before it burnt down, they had a concrete wall around their above ground tanks. And so they're.
Yeah,
One is sufficient.
that is true. There is a threshold for that, for fuel. For battery, there's no threshold as far as environmental regulations go, but if there's something in the building code, then that's something you could check. For fuel, it's got to be over a certain threshold to require a berm under federal regulations.
And in there, I don't know if you all saw it or some of you are flipped to it, he did add an entire section of battery storage specific regulations.
that.
Because right now, we don't have anything in there about battery storage.
And a lot, if they go in smaller, it's gonna probably be battery backed up. Not like the big ones, I think that justify putting a whole transformer station in.
I mean, depending on the size of the facility, the fire department's got 3,100 gallon tankers. It ain't take long to get 10,000 gallons in that hole. I tell you what, it's going to be able to hold a little bit.
if you decide to flow water.
Yeah, it depends on if it's shorting out. I mean, I put water in it all.
Hey,
I can tell you from a hazmat side, sometimes it's better off to let it burn up. Fire's not always your enemy.
I did just get a question. Back to the berms, not doing it all the way around and just doing it in a view shed. The question was, what if somebody buys land behind it where it wasn't required, have a berm to put a subdivision? Does that go on the subdivision owner? I mean, you really can't.
Well-
Just that's the question. So we all got it. So we all figured it out.
So the way I read this thing, when you're reading the thing about the berm, berming is just one of the examples of a more detailed screening buffer
Mhm.
that, so, I don't know that even here it recommends going with berming around it. I think whatever type of screening buffer you're gonna have will need to be detailed per the division, I mean, per the farm.
I would think the berm thing would apply mostly just to the battery storage areas.
Right.
I envisioned it, yeah.
Okay.
In case we had to put water in there, so it doesn't run. I mean, if somebody developed property next door, I mean, you own a chicken farm and somebody buys land next door to you, they don't like your chicken farm, want you to tear it down, you obligated to do that? No. Same principle, I would think.
And who gets there first?
That's right.
Yeah.
I just posed the question.
Was anything else in here that you saw that Jeff put in that other counties had that you didn't think was significant for our county? Or too big, too small, too wide? He pulled up from other counties. Cause once this is passed, I guess you can always add something, but it's awful hard to get something added when you got them breathing down your throat. They're going by what they have passed right now. That's how torch kind of came in. Of course, a lot of this torch is pretty much built to standard where it's going to start. The other big question in here is on the torch when, we threw out all farmland, open cropland. Also a question in here as to cropland. Cause I know of another one right behind this one that pretty much a whole track is cropland. And they can put a farm in pretty fast, and it's some of the best cropland in the state, in the county. But it's owned by a company outside, don't live in the county. They have rented it out to 2 or 3 people to farm. They only let them farm in a couple of years. They pull it, let it grow up a little bit for the birds and the rabbits, then they put somebody else in there to clean it up for them, reseed it. Because they proposed it's off the road, you won't see it. But I'm not in favor too much of taking prime farmland out of the county. Not for solar. I think in here it had, if you wanted a category 4 or 5, which is your classifications of soil, or I thought, could you put in there row crop in the last 10 years? That way they'd have to let it set for 10 years to grow up before they did anything.
Well, Jeff had
Will it, can it come forward?
Jeff had suggested putting that in the comprehensive plan because the zoning ordinance, they have to follow to a T. The comprehensive plan is just a guide. So if we get a unicorn solar project that's just perfect in every way, besides the soil, you all would have that ability to still vote yes for it if you wanted to. If we put in the ordinance that you absolutely cannot apply for solar on class 4 or 5 soils, Jeff didn't like that. He said we might be opening ourselves up to lawsuit. And we don't want that at all. But in the comprehensive plan, it is something you can lean on to approve or deny it.
And the comprehensive plan starts being redone. Right?
Did they put anything in here about the life of these things?
No.
Are you thinking some kind of limit on the life or something like that?
We don't know what the life is.
Yeah.
They don't know what the life is.
No, but Miss Webb was talking to me on the steps after one of the meetings out there, and she said, I said, talk about 30 years. That's all we heard, 30 years. And she said, well, we plan on replacing those panels after 20 years. I said, what do you mean? She said, after 20 years, they're 80% productive. They can be sold to third world countries while they're still fairly operational at a decent price, and we'll put new panels in. And I'm like, so then you want another 30 years? She said, oh, we plan on running these things for 75 to 100 years.
Oh, they'll come up with something different with that.
I would think so. But at the same time, that's a pretty long commitment. I got grandchildren probably won't be alive 100 years from now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, I think it's a good possibility that there will be,
Long
when the site has been prepared, that it would be decommissioned rather than is a possibility, but I think it's a lot more likely that it would be renovated
Updated.
and updated.
I'm just wondering if we shouldn't put a 30-year limit on it unless they decide they want to update it or change those panels out, then they have to come back to us and we could look at it. Because after 20 years, we may say, look, this is a mistake. We don't want this.
I think it's in the siting agreement, if I'm not
Is it?
mistaken. I think it's a limit in the siting agreement.
As long as there's something in there somewhere, that's just not an open-ended deal. It's like the landfill up here was supposed to have a 20-year life. Now they're saying already saying 30 to 40 years. They changed that already. And so I'm just thinking things change down the road for the protection of the county and the citizens. Probably should take a look at it periodically, like every 20 years or every 30 years.
But to the chairman's point here on cropland, since it likelihood, I mean, you take some of the best cropland in the county and put it into solar, and you could be taking it out of its best use for a long time. So I think that it does need to be in the comprehensive plan, but I think it also can be some reference to it in the ordinance. That there is at least a preference for it, for being put on land whose uses are more marginal. Certainly not the best cropland. Cropland is scarce. It's limited. When you have 50 years ago, a typical farm had maybe 50 acres of cropland, 50 acres of pasture land that wasn't as good as cropland, and then 100 acres of woodland, which was less desirable yet. And I think it's a benefit to these companies for them to know upfront that Amelia County does not want solar projects on good cropland.
We could always do like Larkin has suggested, is say it, it can't be built on any cropland unless it's been abandoned for 10 years. If you can prove it hadn't been farmed in 10 years, then it's open territory.
Well, that's kind of what I was thinking, but if Jeff come back, said that could be a lawsuit.
We hadn't brought that particular question up. I'm happy to ask him.
All right.
I think that's different than just the category of soils. So, I mean, because you could run into some good soils under some trees, and that's.
Oh, yeah, you're gonna run into some.
That's all that, yeah, and,
But if it's already productive, even if you take it under trees, it takes a while to get it
oh, that's right.
productive.
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree. I think it's good, even if it just goes in the comprehensive plan. I think it's something that we could discourage the use if it's being actively cropped. And I'd like to see the same thing when you look at the subdivision ordinances.
That was something
Well,
we
yeah.
brought up about, we're just putting this towards solar, but it could apply to all kinds of development
And
because the same issue arises.
I know, yes, some other farm.
Yeah,
it's a whole lot easier to put a house on a field than it is.
I mean, agriculture is the mainstay of the county. We really need to protect it as much.
The very best lands have really been, the
Subdivision.
very best lands have been used since colonial times. That hadn't changed because the quality of the soil, it doesn't change ever.
Well, let's go to the back page. Let's go down kind of what Holly's had spot points and see if we've covered everything. I think the first one's been covered. I had a question on this 5,000 feet setback for the building. Is that gonna run into a problem when you take like that one over 616, you go 5,000 feet, it's not even within the boundaries of the land.
feet was the proposed setback for battery storage. So
And most of the battery storage are gonna be smaller ones. You're gonna have to have a heck of a tract of land to get it in the middle.
yes. Yeah, 5,000, I think is very steep, very steep. I think 1,000 across the board for everything would probably give you all the security you need, but
When you get thinking 5,000 feet, that's a long way.
Almost
it's
a
a long
mile.
way.
Almost a mile.
Property had to be 2 miles wide to be able to fit it in the middle.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And you go into
And
the
then
smaller one, to get it, you're gonna have to go to more acres. So you're shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah.
So what do you all think is a more realistic number for that?
What do you think, David? That figure must have came up at y'all's meeting. I know it came, and I got thinking afterwards, that's a mighty big tract of land.
It came up in the discussion whether to allow battery storage,
Oh, to allow battery storage at all.
trying to deter battery storage. That's where that number come up.
Okay.
I agree with that. Like batteries are just such another level to the danger of the whole project, It's not much danger having photovoltaic cells, but having batteries is like a whole nother level. I think it probably
And they are
could be
going to go bad
discouraged,
sooner or later. Batteries don't last forever,
right?
you know?
They become obsolescent.
You think 1,000 feet? Leave it at 5,000?
I'd say at least 1,500, maybe more.
Let's do it straight too.
Gotta come up with something. Give them some, let's see, this will come back before us for a public hearing, so we gotta have it kind of pretty much hashed out.
You can double it to 2,000.
I'm gonna make a suggestion that we can pass it on, because when Holly writes it up, before it comes back before us,
If you got 1,000 on both sides for your setbacks.
so you're already 2,000. If you put it in the middle.
Figure out some way to get it in the middle. I don't know what size or average the track would have to be.
I don't know, didn't they say the battery about the size of a tractor trailer? I think that's what brought that torch, or someone said,
No, looks like it should be.
tractor trailer, or maybe two side by side, so what's that, 55 feet long, 30 foot wide, 35 foot wide?
Could you phrase it like something, if it's battery storage, it has to be in the center of the facility? That would, it'd be greater than 1,000. It'd be contained away from the property lines.
Yeah.
It's just a thought, just for conversation.
I think that's reasonable. Then any battery storage area in the facility will be in the center of the facility. That way, if there is any sort of a
Leakage, you'd have
leakage or
1,000 feet around.
or something, it wouldn't enter anybody's houses or anything.
There might be things in the layout
Prohibited,
that wouldn't work so well
yeah, depends on how to lay the land.
for that, if you make that right kind of requirement also. You do want to be able to get to it if there's a problem. And so, I guess that, by way of discussion, that's,
We need to do it.
I think when possible, I think that's a good idea, as long as you can, it's in a good spot and you can still get to it. But if you want to not make it very easy for battery storage, if that was the intent of the supervisor, I don't see anything wrong with putting it.
Is it gonna be a one size fits all? Or, I mean, you're talking about, small, large and utility scale projects, right? And I don't know how big of batteries they need for everyone, but I mean, is it a way to separate that between different scale projects? I mean, for a utility scale size, solar farm, you might need something like that. For a small one, if you're talking 50 acres, maybe you can just eliminate no batteries on something. That's
So all of these are utility scale that you all see. Every,
again, yeah, but is that gonna be all we'll ever see? Utility scale?
yeah, because anything greater than, I think it's 1 megawatt is considered utility scale.
Maybe I'm using. the wrong
Anything
term.
smaller than that, the small and medium, are just accessory uses.
Okay.
And
Would
we
they
don't
have-
have to come before you all.
Would something be big enough that it have different battery banks scattered around through the solar? Or can it all electricity be wired to one center battery bank? That's what I don't know.
Yeah, that, I don't know the answers.
I would
There
think,
was some discussion amongst the board members. I'm just speaking what I heard. May be fine with no battery storage. So that's an option too.
The original, Genco Road project, as was originally proposed, was 10 megawatts. And they had 2 battery storage locations, I believe, on that. And one of the reasons, there was a number of reasons why I didn't like it. Anyway, but one of the reasons was that outfit had never even done a battery project. That would have been their first.
Well, if we leave it like it is, with the 5,000 feet in there, is that something that they could, if they needed battery storage, they could come to us and ask for a special exception permit? Can we get around that if case by case scenario?
well, you can drop it to 3,000 still, at 5,000 max. Or
You did, I mean, if we leave it strict, then they have to come to us and give us a better idea what they're doing to get this special exception.
I agree with that. Keep it as default, no battery. If you want batteries, that's an extra step they have to provide and they're gonna contain it.
Right.
Some other localities require, kind of similar to what you're saying, an entirely different application just for battery storage. So their special exception for solar could get approved and the battery storage could get denied.
it's one way of looking at it.
I think the more that we can take a look at it before it goes to the board of supervisors, the better it's going to be. If they've got to get a couple of things done through a special exception, but that gives us opportunity to take a close look at it before it gets passed on.
Ask Jeff to write that somehow. Or you write that somehow.
We've got a big book.
All right, what about the next thing on the screening? Like the 150-foot buffer. Instead of the current 25, I'm sure, I think we pretty much discussed 150. Start to 25. Is that everybody's consensus?
I'm okay.
As long as, I think it should be something in there about being a mix of
Well,
the type screening so that it's not, if the leaves fall off, you're not looking through a bunch of sticks and looking at it. I mean, there should be some, like I said, if you want to do 3 layers, maybe 1 of hardwoods and 2 of evergreens or something, but need something there to keep that screening year round.
well, they did, I think Jeff had in here, a little taller. Has been. I know the one over at Genito, 4 foot? And it's about 20 foot apart. It's gonna take a while. Those pine trees will grow faster than they will. If they got any pines planted in there, but I think that probably ought to be put in there. I think Jeff had in here, it's 16 foot or 15 foot. Initially.
Yeah, that committee meeting, that's what Dexter was having some trouble with, about how quickly trees would get up tall enough to actually do their job.
Once we drop the 25 feet to the 15 feet. Next thing, battery storage. That was, Jeff put in. I think that covered it pretty good.
We can go back and rework some things on that.
The lighting. I would assume he'd be smart enough to put all the lighting facing down.
That would be an easy.
Never know.
Decommissioning. We got a lot of discussion on this, and I think the 3 years is probably, you can always adjust that after that, but certainly 3 years, and if it seems all right, we could update it. The SEP conditions, did y'all have any questions on them? I don't know, one was SEP and one was CS something.
David, what did they do about the bond in the first 5 years? That was the thing I was having issues with before.
Insurance in it,
Yeah,
covered under insurance first 5 years or something.
within the first 5 years, it's the landowner's responsibility to clean it up. And then, did we get 3 years after that? I think, I've looked at it so many,
For the bond. I'm
right, and now one went to, the first 5 years is on the landowner's responsibility. Then after that is 5 years. Renewed every 5 years.
Okay. And I'm fine with that. As long as they just didn't want to put a bond on it for the first 5 years. And I mean, somebody needs to be responsible besides the county. That's all I was worried about.
All right. Goes back there to the next one, application requirement, community meetings. We've kind of discussed that, certainly two. And I guess we discussed too, rather not have row crop land. Highly suggest non-row crop land. And you could have row crop land, I'd say 10 years, but
I do like that. I
I
like,
think the 10 years is a good way,
to do it.
is a good way to do it.
For
And-
10 years, he's gonna grow up in trash or they're gonna put pines in it.
And you all want that to be added to the comprehensive plan or the?
I'd say both of them.
Both.
Both, okay.
And soil classification, kind of like Mr. Morris said, so a lot of hardwoods are on really good ground, but it would take a while after you cut the hardwoods off to make it productive. So if you really want soil classification, that could possibly throw some crop of forestry land out. Going by just classification of the soils.
Yeah, and as variable as the soil is in the county,
It
if you
varies.
get any big, large block, I think that's gonna really, if you make that a hard and fast rule, that's gonna. be
What if you
hard.
go with 10 years row crop, it kind of covers it. Cause a lot of the 10-year row crop is not on the best ground, but at least its fertilization is enough to grow a crop. I think we've covered that timeline. I didn't quite understand that. What's the timeline as to when they start and when they go online or when they start?
Yeah, so right now, our ordinance says that from the date of approval of your special exception permit, you have 2 years to begin construction, and construction must be completed within 5 years from the date of approval. They wanted to tighten that up a little bit and have construction begin within 18 months of the date of the SCP approval.
What's your pleasure on that? I see nothing wrong with that.
What if it doesn't happen? Then what?
So
Doesn't
the
happen, they lose.
that is, they can always, if they're getting near that 18 months, they can always come back to the board and ask for an extension.
And if they don't come back, they lose it, it's gone.
It's void.
I don't think too many will wait 18 months. But I think it was good in here. I forgot where Jeff had it, is the times that they can work on the solar farm.
And we put that as a condition in Torch's project as well.
Okay. I think that needed. So we'll move that back from 24 to 18 months. And then comprehensive plan, we'll put about row crop.
Yeah.
Anything we missed?
did we ever discuss number one, the location? A mile of a high voltage line?
Yeah, so we kind of stole this idea from Nottaway. We met with them to go through their new ordinance, and they showed us their map. It greatly reduces the amount of land in the county if you put that stipulation in, saying that it has to be within a mile. And what they learned doing their research was that it's not even financially feasible for companies to do it further than 1 mile out from a high voltage transmission line. So we put that in there as just a way to try and keep it contained.
I don't know me, but I thought, say, if you want to put a solar farm up there in Painville and they want to spend the money to run three-phase current in there, it's fine and dandy with me, because I mean, that's some land that you can't do anything with.
You talking bad about your land.
For the record, I would live beside one if I had to.
But I'm saying that's, but where all your main lines are is where all the houses gonna be. That's where the company's gonna put the main lines. So,
Well, I've been told that they can go quite some distance. If, it depends on the size of the project. If the size of the project is large enough, then they can put in a substation.
that's what Torch is doing.
And that's what is happening in a lot of places, a lot of parts of the country, I think they're doing that, so.
If you all
I
don't
don't-
like it, we can take it out.
I don't think it's a good idea. Because we don't know uh, what's going to happen. I mean, on the one hand, we're saying we like to, I mean, get the sun that's shining everywhere. And we're saying we'd like to use it more marginal land. And then come along and say it limited like this. I don't think it works.
Yeah, I'd have to look at a map to see where the high voltage lines are running through the county. I don't know how much that's gonna limit it.
Yeah, I kind of agree. If the company thinks it's financially feasible to run the lines, then let them do it.
Okay.
That's my thought.
I mean, I'd leave
Frankie's
it like it is,
close to
a
my,
mile of the
Yeah,
of the big lines. And if they want to expand the county's infrastructure by building something, then they can come to us and ask for approval.
That's not a bad way to do it.
Yeah, that's a good one to do.
that kind of cleared up, David?
We just hadn't discussed it.
When I was up in Maine a couple weeks ago, they got them down both sides of the interstate for miles. I don't know if it's on the state right away or what, because they don't go very deep. But they just got them lined up right down the side of the interstate. Ain't not very attractive, but I don't know if the state's collecting the money from that or how, I don't know whose it is, but it's right down the side of the road. You didn't see many in the country, but you saw them down the side of the interstate.
Was there anything else we've missed?
there's a lot of different states doing a lot of different things.
Yeah.
I understand in Indiana, the smallest they would even consider is 1,500 acres.
Hmm.
So in other words, they're all large. And all the states have, variable ones, but, maybe a lot of small ones too.
Yeah, I don't, that's one, I'm just saying, the Painville area, down in the Ford area down there, I mean, that's not some of your best land, but I mean, if they're willing to put one in that area and run power to it, that would make it a little more acceptable for houses instead of going out to farmland
Yeah.
for housing developments.
Fair point.
Uh,
Yeah, we can add that in to clean that up a little bit.
You wouldn't have to run your generator when the power goes out.
It comes on anytime. But I don't. I think we've got enough in here now that any more solar farms, at least have an idea of what we're looking.
And that was another thing too, any projects coming now, if someone submits one tomorrow, we're holding it until this is all done. So any project that comes through is going to have to go by this new ordinance.
I don't mind it being a little restrictive, but they have to come to us. I mean, that way we get to kind of review them on an individual basis.
But we want enough flexibility in there to work with them too. We don't want to be too rigid. Because then that kind of stifles shit somewhat too, so. Is any other comments or anything else If you think of something else, certainly call Holly. Jeff, and look into it. You got another
I think the decommissioning, the bond was every 3 years.
every 3 years? I was thinking, that's what I've heard.
Leave that the same.
Yeah. Because you can always extend it, but if you review it in 3 years, then you say, well, we'll look at it again in 5 years. 2 more years, so I mean, because you get 5 years and probably should have been looked at 3 years.
A whole lot would depend on whether it's an inflationary period or not.
Yeah.
Did we ever get a good clear answer on Roy's question about the lifespan? I know in the siting agreement, it's in that for this project.
Yeah, I made a note in here to ask Jeff if we can somehow incorporate that in
Okay.
there.
I think that's a,
Or at least requiring them to come back after the first term and renew their special exception permit if they want to go longer.
Or if they want to do any sort of a major renovation, I think they need to come back to us too.
Definitely, definitely.
that needs to be, like, that needs to be upfront because the siting agreement is kind of a step after the fact.
Oh,
So
yeah.
if they have that up front, that would make things easier.
Cleaner. Any other questions or comments?
I had something besides the solar, if we're done with that.
We can deal with anything. It's open.
In the, let's see, in the May meeting, we passed a motion for the planning commission to defer both ordinances amendments until Jeff Gore revised the definitions for the shooting range.
I was gonna ask her, I had
Any
to
updates on that?
ask her that, but
So I talked to Jeff and we're actually not gonna go that route anymore. We did some research and we can classify it under a commercial recreational facility and just make it specific to a shooting range. And we will have one of those next month. So the use is already in there. It's just part of an existing use.
I kind of would, wondering if Jeff had gotten back to that.
Mhm. Cool.
Any more comments?
I did have one question, sorry, back on the solar. The blue comments that Jeff Gore put on the environmental section at the end, does that mean that that's going in, or was that just his comments? I guess I was trying to understand.
Those are just his comments, but if you're referring to the comments he had in there on the last page with the conditions, yes, the intention is for those to go in there.
Okay, good. That was gonna be my, okay. That's what I
Oh,
wanted
okay,
to check.
yes.
Because that was very much more specific than what we had up there.
Yeah, those
so-
conditions would be put in every single
Okay.
project. Those would be put on their permits.
Okay.
I was assuming that. Good thing bringing it up. Any other comments? I think we've been pretty productive this evening. Didn't take quite as long as I thought we were. I don't have any other comments that I know of, other than, like I said, we'll probably have another meeting next month. And,
Definitely gonna happen.
and then I guess the solar people, before we pass, if they wanted to have 2 public meetings to discuss it in the area, they could do it before this was ever passed.
They're working on that. They were trying to nail down a location somewhere near there, so we've been talking about that.
Well, it could be a location there, it could be here, I guess.
I offered here, I guess their concern was they wanted to go to the area that they're doing it and have people. Yeah, we offered this. This is where Torch held theirs. But
All right, well, no one knows anything else. Appreciate everyone coming out. We'll adjourn the meeting. See you next month.
I just want to say, I think the watching the workshop at the board supervised interaction with the attorney and everything was very useful. It was very helpful to us to be prepared. Yes.
That'll do.
Hey,
And our dirt ain't no good.
I know, I heard that.
I'm signing off. It's dinner time on vacation.
I just do that as a negative.
Enjoy the rest of your trip.
Evil dirt. Hey,
Yeah.